The front door was already open when I carried my deployment bag onto the porch. That should have been the first thing that felt wrong. I expected my daughter to come running the way she always had before every training assignment. Instead, I heard laughter drifting from the kitchen, followed by the sound of tiny feet. Then she appeared. She had grown taller while I was gone. Her hair reached her shoulders now, and she was wearing a yellow sweater I had never seen before. She stopped when she saw me. For one hopeful second, I thought she recognized me. Instead, she turned over her shoulder and smiled at someone behind her. "Mom," she called, "someone's here." My younger sister, Lauren, stepped into the hallway with a dish towel still in her hands. She froze, not because I had surprised her, because she hadn't expected me to come home that afternoon. The silence between us lasted only a heartbeat before she forced a smile that never reached her eyes. "Claire, they moved your flight." I barely heard her. My daughter was hiding halfway behind Lauren's leg, studying me the way children study strangers who somehow know their names. Every instinct I had learned during years as an Air Force flight nurse told me to slow down, observe, and not react before understanding the situation. Then I noticed the manila folder lying open on the kitchen counter. A blue county court seal caught my attention. Beside it sat a notarized document. My eyes landed on one page, halfway down. My name. My signature, granting temporary legal guardianship of my daughter to Lauren. I didn't touch the paper. I simply stared at it. Because although the signature looked exactly like mine, I had never signed it. Lauren followed my gaze. For the first time since I'd walked inside, genuine fear crossed her face. "Claire," she whispered, "I can explain." 6 months earlier, leaving for deployment had been one of the hardest decisions I'd made as a mother. Not because I questioned my duty. I had served for over a decade. Temporary deployments were part of the career I'd chosen long before I became a parent. The difficult part was trusting someone else with the person who mattered most. My divorce from Ethan had been finalized nearly 2 years earlier. We shared legal custody, but his construction business kept him traveling constantly. When my overseas assignment became unavoidable, he admitted he couldn't guarantee consistent childcare. "I'll make a mess of school pickups," he'd said with an embarrassed laugh. "You know I will." He wasn't a bad father. He simply wasn't organized. Lauren immediately volunteered. "I work remotely now," she'd said. "Emma already loves staying with me. It'll be like an extended sleepover." She had always been Emma's favorite aunt. Patient, creative, reliable. Or at least that was what I believed. The legal arrangement had been simple. My attorney prepared a limited caregiving authorization, allowing Lauren to handle school emergencies, medical appointments, and daily decisions while I remained overseas. It specifically stated it was not guardianship. It specifically required my written approval for any permanent legal change. I remembered reading every page before signing. I remembered placing copies inside a blue accordion folder in my home office. I remembered telling Lauren exactly where they were. Now I stood looking at an entirely different document. A document carrying my signature beneath words I knew I had never agreed to. Emma peeked around Lauren again. She studied my uniform before asking softly, "Are you staying this time?" "Not." "Mom." "Not." "I missed you." Just that careful little question. Children rarely invent emotional distance. They absorb it. Someone had been teaching my daughter to expect my absence. I knelt until we were eye level. "I came home for you." She looked uncertain, almost guilty. Lauren stepped closer. "Emma, sweetheart, why don't you finish your snack?" My daughter hesitated before quietly obeying. She walked into the dining room without looking back. I watched her disappear. The space between us felt much larger than 6 months. Lauren folded her arms. "I didn't want you finding out like this." "Finding out what?" She glanced toward Emma. "Not here." I looked again at the guardianship papers. The notary stamp carried a date from 3 months earlier, halfway through my deployment. Exactly when communication had become limited because our medical unit had been relocated. A coincidence? Or timing chosen by someone who understood I couldn't easily respond? I finally picked up the document. The paper stock felt official. The county filing number looked legitimate. Someone hadn't printed this at home. Someone had filed it, legally, using my name, my signature, my daughter. I spoke carefully. "Where did these come from?" Lauren swallowed. "They were approved." "Approved by whom?" "The court." "Based on what?" She didn't answer. Instead, she looked toward the hallway, where Emma was humming to herself while arranging colored pencils across the dining table. Lauren lowered her voice. I honestly thought this would be easier if you understood the whole situation first. My training had taught me to recognize stress responses, rapid blinking, shallow breathing, protective positioning. Lauren wasn't reacting like someone who had won custody. She was reacting like someone afraid of what I'd discover next. I slipped the guardianship papers back into the folder. Then I noticed something almost too small to matter. Clipped behind the court order was a photocopy of the caregiving authorization I actually had signed before deployment. Except one page was missing, the page containing the limitations on Lauren's authority. It hadn't been accidentally misplaced. Someone had deliberately removed it. And in that quiet kitchen, while my daughter colored pictures only a few feet away, I understood one thing with absolute certainty. This hadn't begun with a forged signature. It had begun much earlier, long before I boarded the military transport overseas. Someone had been preparing this, long enough to know exactly which page needed to disappear. Lauren waited until Emma had carried her colored pencils upstairs before closing the kitchen door. The click of the latch felt deliberate. I remained standing beside the counter with the folder tucked beneath my arm. My deployment bag was still near the front entrance, unopened, as if I might be sent away again before I had even taken off my boots. Lauren leaned against the sink. You need to understand what it was like here. That does not explain my signature. I know. Then start with that. She rubbed both hands over her face. Ethan brought the papers. My ex-husband's name landed between us with an unpleasant weight. Why would Ethan bring you guardianship papers? He said you had approved them. I spoke to him 4 days ago. Lauren looked at me quickly. What did he say? That Emma was doing well, that you had everything under control. Her expression changed, not into surprise but calculation. He told me you weren't calling him anymore. I called whenever the communication schedule allowed. He said most of your calls were going through him because Emma became upset afterward. I stared at her. During the deployment, my scheduled video calls with Emma had gradually become less frequent. At first, Lauren blamed time zone confusion, then school events, then a stomach virus. Eventually, Ethan told me Emma had begun refusing the calls because seeing me made the separation harder. I had believed him. Worse, I had accepted it as a consequence of leaving. There had been nights overseas when I sat on the edge of my narrow bunk after a shift, staring at my phone and wondering whether calling made me selfish. I convinced myself that allowing Emma's space was an act of love. Now I wondered whether my daughter had ever refused me at all. Bring me your phone, I said. Lauren stiffened. Why? I want to see the messages where I approve the guardianship. I don't have to hand you my phone. No, you don't. But if you believe this was legal, you should want to show me. She looked toward the ceiling as if she could hear Emma moving in the bedroom above us. Then she unlocked her phone and opened the message thread. The contact at the top displayed my name. The messages were brief. I'm extending. Situation unstable. Emma needs continuity. Sign whatever Ethan sends. Lauren asked whether I was certain. The reply beneath it read, You've been more of a mother to her lately than I have. My stomach tightened. The words sounded close enough to my voice to be convincing, but they were too polished, too cruel in exactly the way Lauren needed them to be. Send these to me. She shook her head. Not until I know what you're planning. My daughter called you mom. She started doing that on her own, and you allowed it. She was confused. She is 7, Lauren. Confusion is not permission. Her eyes filled, but her voice hardened. You left her. The accusation struck deeper because part of me already believed it. I deployed. You volunteered for the assignment. The unit needed pediatric qualified flight nurses. And Emma needed her mother. I looked away. That was my weakness. Lauren knew it, and Ethan knew it too. They understood that guilt could silence me more effectively than threats. Before I left, I had tried to make everything predictable. I labeled Emma's school clothes by weekday. I arranged automatic payments for her activities. I created a shared calendar with doctor appointments, teacher contacts, and emergency numbers. I also made one mistake. I gave Ethan access to my home office because he said he needed copies of Emma's insurance records. The blue accordion folder had been in the bottom drawer of my desk. He knew where it was. A knock sounded from the kitchen doorway. Emma stood there, holding a small tablet against her chest. Mom, Lauren, it won't connect. The name came naturally to her. Lauren took the tablet and crouched beside her. Try the upstairs charger, sweetheart. Emma looked at me again. Her gaze dropped to the uniform patch on my shoulder. Are you sleeping here? This is my house, I said too quickly. She flinched. Regret came immediately. I swabbed my voice. Yes, I'm staying here tonight. Emma glanced at Lauren before leaving. She was waiting for my sister's permission in my home. I turned back to Lauren. When did she stop using my name for you? Lauren pressed her lips together. About 2 months ago. After the guardianship was filed, she did not answer. That silence told me enough. I opened the folder again and examined the court order more closely. The filing listed my address correctly. It named Ethan as the child's father and stated that both biological parents consented to Lauren's temporary guardianship due to extended military absence and unstable paternal housing. Ethan's signature appeared beneath mine. Unlike mine, his was probably genuine. At the bottom was a mailing certification showing copies had been sent to both parents. My copy had supposedly been mailed to an address I had never lived at. The street name was almost correct, but the house number belonged to Ethan's old rental property. That could have been dismissed as a clerical error. Except Ethan had sold that property 8 months before my deployment. Someone had deliberately chosen an address where the notice would never reach me. I took a photograph of the page. Lauren stepped forward. Claire, don't make this uglier than it already is. I looked at her over the top of my phone. You still haven't told me why you agreed. Her shoulders sagged. For the first time, she looked less like an intruder and more like the sister who used to sit with me on the garage floor when our parents fought. Because Ethan said you weren't coming back when you promised. That was never true. He showed me an email. What email? He said your assignment had been extended by another year. My deployment orders had never been extended. I had received no such offer. No such discussion had occurred. Show it to me. I only saw a printed copy. Where is it? He kept it. Of course he had. A forged signature could be examined. A false email could disappear. I closed the folder. Then my phone vibrated inside my pocket. A message from Ethan appeared on the screen. Welcome home. Below it came a second message. Do not remove Emma from Lauren care. The court order is still active. I had not told him I was back. My return date had been changed less than 24 hours earlier. Only 3 people had known. My commanding nurse, the transportation officer, and Lauren. I raised my eyes toward my sister. She looked at the message and stepped back. I didn't tell him. Maybe she was lying. But the fear in her face did not look rehearsed. And that meant Ethan had another way of knowing exactly when I entered the house. I did not confront Lauren about Ethan's message. Not yet. Years in medical transport had taught me that the first explanation offered under pressure was often designed to stop the questions, not answer them. I needed distance from the house, and I needed Emma somewhere she could breathe without watching adults measure every word. I'm taking her to dinner, I said. Lauren shook her head immediately. The order says she remains in my care. I am her mother, and until the court changes it, I'm her guardian. The words hurt her as soon as she said them. I saw it in the way she looked down. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing one sneaker and holding the other in her hand. Are we going somewhere? I forced my face into something gentle. We're getting pancakes. It's almost dinner. That has never stopped us before. A small smile appeared, then vanished when she looked at Lauren. Lauren stood very still. Finally she nodded. 2 hours. I hated that I accepted the condition, but fighting in front of Emma would only confirm whatever story she had already been told about me. At the restaurant, she sat across from me and cut one pancake into tiny squares without eating them. Her eyes kept moving toward the entrance. Are you waiting for Aunt Lauren? She shrugged. You can call her that with me. Her fork paused. She said it makes you sad. Calling her Aunt Lauren? No, calling you Mom. The sentence was so quiet I nearly missed it. I placed both hands under the table because they had started shaking. Who told you that? Daddy said you were busy helping other families. That doesn't make me stop being yours. She looked down at her plate. He said sometimes grown-ups choose their jobs. There was no accusation in her voice. That made it worse. I wanted to correct every lie at once. Instead, I asked about school, her teacher, the book she was reading, and whether she still slept with the faded stuffed rabbit she had carried since preschool. She answered carefully at first. Then she began talking faster. By the time the waitress brought the check, Emma had told me about a class presentation, a loose tooth, and a girl named Lucy who had stopped sharing markers. It was not forgiveness, but it was a beginning. When we returned, Lauren was waiting beside the front window. I took Emma upstairs, helped her brush her teeth, and sat beside her bed until her breathing slowed. She did not ask me to leave. That felt like more than I deserved. Downstairs, I found Lauren in the living room. "I need somewhere else to stay tonight," I said. Her face softened. "You don't have to leave." "I do if we are going to avoid turning this house into a battlefield." I called the one person outside the family I trusted enough to involve. Mara Ellis had worked beside me during 3 years of aeromedical assignments before leaving the service to become a patient safety investigator at a civilian hospital. She was practical, blunt, and incapable of confusing sympathy with help. She arrived 20 minutes later. After reading the guardianship order, she did not tell me everything would be fine. She said, "You need a family law attorney tomorrow morning, and tonight you need copies of every document you can legally access." Then she looked toward my office. "Does Ethan still have keys?" "He shouldn't." That wasn't my question. We entered the office together. The room looked almost untouched, but the bottom desk drawer was slightly misaligned. Inside, the blue accordion folder remained where I had left it. The signed caregiving authorization was still there. Its limitation page was missing. Mara photographed the folder before either of us moved anything. Then I noticed a thin black cord running behind the desk. It connected to a small plastic device fastened beneath the wooden frame with adhesive strips. Mara crouched but did not touch it. "Do you recognize that?" I shook my head. It was smaller than a deck of cards, with one blinking light and a cellular service label on the back. We called the non-emergency police line, not because I expected an arrest, but because I wanted the device documented before it could disappear. An officer arrived, photographed its position, and removed it after confirming it was a commercially available GPS tracker. It did not explain how Ethan knew I was inside the house. Then Mara pointed toward my deployment bag near the office door. The bag had been transported from the base terminal in my own car. We checked beneath the rear bumper. A second tracker was attached inside the wheel well. This one was registered through a subscription account. The officer could not identify the subscriber without legal process, but he gave me an incident number and advised me to preserve Ethan's message. I stood in the driveway, staring at the device sealed inside an evidence bag. The guardianship papers had been prepared months earlier. The false messages had shaped Lauren's decisions. Now someone had tracked my vehicle closely enough to know the moment I returned home. This was no longer a family misunderstanding. It was a system. And whoever built it had expected me to come back confused, ashamed, and alone. Mara drove me to a hotel near the base after midnight. I left Emma with Lauren because removing her against an active guardianship order could have been used against me, no matter how fraudulent I believed that order to be. Every part of me resisted walking away from my daughter again, but anger was not a legal strategy. Before leaving, I photographed Emma's bedroom, the refrigerator calendar, the school notices, and the medication list taped inside the pantry door. I did not know yet which details mattered. My work had taught me that patterns often became visible only after the emergency passed. At 8 the next morning, Mara introduced me to Dana Mercer, a family law attorney who had represented military parents in custody disputes. Dana read the order twice. "This is temporary guardianship, not a termination of parental rights," she said. "That matters. How quickly can we undo it? Not quickly enough for you." I disliked her immediately for being honest. She explained that we could request an expedited hearing based on alleged fraud, but we needed more than my denial. The court had relied on notarized consent forms, service records, and supporting declarations. Each document would need to be challenged separately. "Start with the notary," Dana said. "Then the filing history. Then prove where you physically were when this was signed." That part I could do. My deployment records documented my location, duty schedule, and restricted travel status on the date beside my signature. I submitted a formal request through the personnel office for certified copies of my orders and movement logs. Dana obtained the publicly accessible court file that afternoon. The guardianship petition contained more than the papers I had seen in Lauren's kitchen. There was a declaration from Ethan claiming I had become emotionally detached from Emma. There was a statement from Lauren describing missed calls, delayed responses, and my supposed agreement that she was better suited to provide stability. Most damaging was a letter presented as proof that I had requested a 12-month deployment extension. The formatting resembled official correspondence. The language did not. Military orders did not describe assignments as voluntary overseas service leave, and no legitimate personnel notice would have been sent from the civilian email address printed in the header. Someone had created a document that looked official enough for people unfamiliar with the system. The notary record gave us our first verifiable lead. The consent form had supposedly been signed before a notary named Gerald Pike at a mobile document service in Virginia. On the date listed, I was more than 5,000 miles away. Dana contacted the notary company and requested the journal entry associated with the document. Gerald refused to release it without a subpoena, but he confirmed one detail over the phone. The signer had presented a state driver's license bearing my name. My license had never left my wallet. I checked it anyway. It was there. Then I remembered the renewal. 3 weeks before deployment, a replacement license had arrived because my previous card had developed a crack across the magnetic strip. Ethan had offered to collect my mail while I was working an overnight shift. I never saw the replacement envelope. I assumed it had been delayed and went to the licensing office in person for another copy. That missing card had carried my photograph, address, and signature. By itself, it was not enough to impersonate me before a careful notary, but the petition file contained a photocopy of the license, and the image quality was poor enough to conceal differences. Dana looked across her desk. Who had access to your financial records? Ethan had access to one joint account for Emma's expenses. I left it open after the divorce because her school payments came from it. Get the statements. As a named account holder, I could legally retrieve them. The activity looked ordinary at first. Tuition, groceries, pediatric copays. Then Mara noticed 3 recurring payments to Pike Mobile Documentation. The amounts were small, $45, $60, $85, all paid from the account intended for Emma. The first payment occurred 2 months before my deployment. The second matched the date of the false guardianship consent. The third came 6 weeks later after the court requested a corrected affidavit. That was the harmless clue I had nearly dismissed, routine withdrawals hidden among legitimate expenses. But one transaction disturbed Dana more than the notary payments. A wire transfer for $28,000 had left the account 4 days after guardianship was approved. The recipient was a private lender connected to Ethan's construction company. My daughter's care account had not merely funded the paperwork used to replace me. It had paid one of Ethan's debts. And because Lauren had legal guardianship, the bank had accepted her authorization for the transfer. When I called her, she answered on the first ring. "I didn't know it was his debt," she said. "What did you think you were signing?" Her voice broke. "An education account for Emma." That answer changed the shape of the betrayal. Ethan had not only used my absence to gain control over our daughter, he had used Lauren's guardianship as access to money she did not realize she was moving. And if the transfer was part of a larger plan, then the forged signature had never been the final objective. It had been the key. By the next morning, Ethan had already begun telling people I was unstable. The first call came from my squadron's family readiness office. A civilian coordinator named Mrs. Bell asked whether I was safe and whether I needed behavioral health support after returning from deployment. Her voice was careful in the way people speak when they have been warned not to upset someone. "Who contacted you?" I asked. She paused. "Your former spouse expressed concern about your adjustment." "What concern?" "He reported that you entered the home unexpectedly, frightened your daughter, threatened the temporary guardian, and accused family members of a conspiracy." I closed my eyes. Every individual statement contained just enough truth to survive casual scrutiny. I had entered unexpectedly. Emma had been frightened. I had accused Lauren and Ethan of coordinated fraud. The lie was in the arrangement. Ethan had taken facts and placed them in an order that made me look dangerous. Bell explained that no formal action had been taken, but my leadership had been notified because I worked in patient transport and had recently returned from an operational assignment. An hour later, my supervisor called. Major Harlan did not accuse me of anything. He asked me to report for a routine post-deployment evaluation before returning to flight status. Normally, the evaluation would not have troubled me. Now it felt like another document Ethan intended to use. I told Dana immediately. "He's creating a record," she said. "Not proof, a record. Those are different things, but frightened people confuse them." "What am I supposed to do?" "Ignore it. You comply with every legitimate requirement. You do not argue with your chain of command. You do not post online. You do not send emotional messages. You give him nothing he can cut into pieces. I understood the advice. I also hated it. Silence had already cost me 6 months with my daughter. That afternoon, Ethan filed an emergency request asking the court to restrict my contact with Emma until I completed a psychological assessment. He attached the message I had sent after leaving the house. I know what you did. I will take apart every lie you built. At the time, I had believed it sounded controlled. On paper, isolated from context, it looked threatening. That was my mistake. Dana read it without comment. I was angry. I know. I didn't threaten him. I know that too. But judges read exhibits, not your intentions. The temporary request was not fully granted. The court allowed supervised contact pending the expedited hearing, with Lauren approved as the supervising adult. It felt like a false victory when Dana called to say Ethan had failed to block me completely. Then I understood what supervised contact meant. I could see my daughter, but never alone. Lauren would sit close enough to hear every word. The first visit took place in a children's room at Dana's office because I refused to return to the house. Emma brought her stuffed rabbit. She sat on the floor while I helped her build a plastic hospital from a toy set. At first, she barely spoke. Then she placed a tiny figure on a stretcher and said, "This one's the mom, but she has to leave again." I looked at her. "Does she come back?" Emma pushed the stretcher beneath the plastic archway. "Maybe." Lauren shifted in her chair. I wanted to ask what Ethan had told her. I wanted to explain orders, duty, sacrifice, and all the ways adults can love children while still leaving rooms they desperately want to remain in. Instead, I handed Emma the toy ambulance. "What happens if she comes back?" Emma thought about it. "She has to prove she knows the patient." The sentence was too precise to be accidental. "Who said that?" Her fingers tightened around the ambulance. Lauren interrupted. "Claire, I'm asking a question, and she doesn't have to answer." Emma looked between us, then began putting the toys away even though the visit was not over. That was the consequence I had not anticipated. Every effort to uncover the truth was becoming another adult conflict Emma had to survive. When the hour ended, she hugged Lauren first. Then she stood in front of me with her arms at her sides. I knelt. "You never have to choose who to hug." Her face crumpled, but she did not cry. "Daddy said choosing is how courts know where children belong." Lauren looked away. I felt something inside me give way. Ethan had moved beyond manipulating documents. He was teaching our daughter that affection was evidence. That love could be measured, reported, and used against someone. After they left, I went into the restroom and locked the door. I sat on the closed toilet lid in my uniform, pressing a paper towel against my mouth so no one outside would hear me break. I had transported injured children through turbulence while alarms sounded around me. I had made decisions with seconds available and lives depending on them. But I could not protect my own daughter from a sentence whispered by her father. For several minutes, I considered doing exactly what Ethan expected, going public, posting the forged papers, naming the notary, telling every relative, neighbor, and colleague what he had done before he could reshape the story again. My phone was already in my hand when Mara called. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "You can win the argument tonight, or you can build a case that protects Emma next month. You probably can do both." I hated her for being right. I deleted the post before publishing it. Then I opened a new folder on my laptop. Not anger, not explanations, documents, dates, statements, school records, bank transfers. Every lie Ethan had told depended on me reacting faster than I could verify. So I made a decision that felt like surrender but was not. I would let him believe I was still the woman guilt could silence. And while he kept talking, I would prepare quietly. The first evidence that changed my understanding of the case came from someone I had spent weeks blaming. Gerald Pike's notary journal was produced after Dana obtained a subpoena. Each entry listed the date, document type, identification presented, fee, and the signer's thumbprint. The entry for my guardianship consent contained my name. It contained the number from my missing driver's license. It did not contain my thumbprint. Beside that space, Gerald had written, "Signer's hand bandaged." Dana placed the photocopy on the conference table. "Were you injured before deployment?" "No." "Did Lauren have a hand injury?" I thought back to the kitchen, the court papers, the way she had gripped the dish towel. "No." Gerald had also retained a security image from the mobile appointment because the signing occurred in the lobby of a private lending office. The photograph was grainy, captured from above, but it showed enough. The woman seated across from Gerald had dark hair pinned beneath a baseball cap. Her face was turned away. One hand was wrapped in white gauze. She was wearing Lauren's green wool coat. I recognized the brass toggles immediately. Our mother had given it to her 2 Christmases earlier. For nearly an hour, I sat with the image in front of me, trying to make my mind accept what my eyes had already decided. Lauren had not merely believed forged messages. She had impersonated me. I called Dana from the hallway outside her office. I want her removed from Emma's care. We can seek that, but listen first. There is nothing left to hear. There is always something left to hear. The question is whether it helps your daughter. I drove to the house before I could be talked out of it. That was another mistake. Lauren opened the door but did not invite me inside. Emma was at school. For once, neither of us had to lower our voices for her sake. I held up the photograph. Lauren looked at it and closed her eyes. You were there, yes. You signed my name. Yes, the simplicity of her answer made me angrier than denial would have. Why? Because Ethan said the court would reject the guardianship unless both parents signed in person. So you dressed like me? He brought the coat. The answer stopped me. He told me your military identification couldn't be copied safely. He said the notary only needed to see enough to match the license. And you believed that? No. That word came out almost soundless. Lauren stepped back from the doorway. I knew it was wrong. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself you had already agreed, and this was only fixing paperwork. You used my signature to take my child. Her face tightened. I thought I was keeping her from being taken by strangers. I stared at her. She explained that Ethan had shown her an email claiming my deployment unit was under review after a medication handling incident. He said if the guardianship was not completed quickly, child services might question whether Emma had stable care. The story was false, but it had been built around something real. My unit had reported a transport documentation error during the first month overseas. It had not involved me, but I had mentioned the delay during one call with Ethan. He had taken a fragment of truth and turned it into a threat Lauren was already afraid to face. I was scared, she said, and I liked being needed. That was the first fully honest thing she had told me. After our mother died, Lauren had drifted through jobs and relationships, while I built a career, married, divorced, and raised Emma. I had treated her willingness to help as proof she was reliable. I had never asked how much of her identity depended on being indispensable to us. Her fear did not excuse what she had done, but it explained why Ethan chose her. He had not needed a willing criminal. He needed someone lonely enough to rationalize one unforgivable decision. Then Lauren told me the part that was the stakes beyond custody. Ethan had asked her to sign another document 3 days earlier. A beneficiary change form for a life insurance policy in Emma's name. Lauren had refused. He said it was just to protect the money, she whispered. But the form listed his company as trustee. My anger shifted. The guardianship had given him access to Emma's account. Now he was trying to position his failing business between my daughter and every asset meant for her future. This was no longer about replacing me as Emma's mother. It was about using her legal identity as collateral. Lauren signed a sworn statement 2 days later. Dana made her read every line twice before signing. The statement did not absolve her. It admitted that she had impersonated me before the notary, used my missing driver's license, and relied on documents Ethan provided. It also described the false deployment extension email, the invented child services threat, the transfer from Emma's account, and the beneficiary form Ethan later asked her to approve. When Lauren reached the paragraph about wearing her green coat to resemble me, she stopped. I could lose Emma. Dana did not soften the answer. You may. Lauren looked at me. I wanted to say that losing access was the natural cost of betraying a child's mother. Instead, I thought about Emma standing in Dana's playroom, treating affection like testimony. This is not about what either of us deserves, I said. It is about what she can safely trust. Lauren signed. That was the beginning of 7 weeks of waiting. Dana filed a motion to dissolve the guardianship and requested temporary safeguards over Emma's accounts. She also sent formal preservation notices to Ethan, his company, the private lender, and the notary service so relevant records could not be destroyed without consequence. The court froze further withdrawals from Emma's care account, but left the supervision arrangement in place until the hearing. That was our false victory. The money was protected. My relationship with Emma was not. Twice each week I saw her under supervision. Lauren continued attending because the court had not yet removed her, though after her statement, she stopped sitting close enough to hear every whisper. At first, Emma barely touched me. Then, one afternoon, she brought the faded rabbit and placed it in my lap. "You remember his name? Captain Button." She examined my face. "Daddy said you forgot things overseas." "I forgot where I put my reading glasses twice." "That's not the same, no." She climbed onto the chair beside me, not against me, but near enough for our sleeves to touch. Progress came in inches. My post-deployment evaluation cleared me for duty, but Major Harlan delayed my return to flight status while the family matter remained active. It was not punishment. The decision was based on stress, missed sleep, and the fact that I had admitted difficulty concentrating. That honesty cost me a training rotation I had worked toward for almost a year. For one evening, I blamed Ethan. Then I admitted the harder truth. I was not ready to carry patients through the air, while my attention was divided between alarm tones and court deadlines. Losing the rotation still hurt. So did the mortgage payment I covered alone after the joint account was frozen. So did the silence from relatives who had already accepted Ethan's version, because it was easier than choosing sides. Mara became the person who kept me practical. She helped me build a timeline using records I could lawfully obtain. Call logs from my phone provider, authenticated copies of my deployment orders, bank statements, court notices, school attendance records, and the messages Lauren had received from the number saved under my name. The messages did not come from my phone. A subpoena to the carrier showed they came from a prepaid number activated near Ethan's office. That number had purchased data using a debit card tied to his construction company. It was strong evidence. It was not the strongest. The final piece had been sitting in Emma's school file for months. Her guidance counselor, Mrs. Patel, had kept dated notes after Emma began showing anxiety during classroom transitions. Dana obtained them through my lawful parental access to educational records. One note documented a meeting with Ethan and Lauren 6 weeks before the guardianship petition. Mrs. Patel had written, "Father stated mother will likely extend overseas assignment. Requested school use guardian contact first and avoid upsetting child with uncertain return dates." At that point, no extension letter existed. No guardianship petition had been filed. Ethan had been preparing the story before Lauren impersonated me, before the false messages, and before the notary appointment. The note established planning. Another entry mattered even more. Emma had told Mrs. Patel, "Daddy says Aunt Lauren will be my practice mom until the papers work." Practice mom. The phrase explained why Emma had shifted so gradually from Aunt Lauren to Mom Lauren. It had not happened naturally. Ethan had introduced the idea as a game before turning it into a rule. Dana placed the school notes beside the carrier records. "This is what connects intent to conduct," she said. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt sick. Every new document strengthened my case while revealing another moment in which Emma had been managed, rehearsed, or frightened. 3 weeks before the hearing, Dana offered Ethan a way to stop. He could consent to dissolving the guardianship, return the transferred money through a structured repayment agreement, accept neutral custody evaluation, and suspend unsupervised financial control over Emma's assets. He refused. His attorney replied that Lauren had acted independently and that Ethan had merely tried to provide stability, while I pursued a career incompatible with consistent parenting. That sentence kept me awake, not because I believed it entirely, because part of me believed enough of it to hurt. The night before the hearing, I sat on the hotel floor with my uniform folded inside its garment bag. I had decided not to wear it to court. I did not want my service to function as a shield or a performance. I chose a navy suit instead. Then I opened a voice message Emma had sent through Lauren. Her voice was quiet. "Mom, are people going to ask me who I love more?" I replayed it once. Then I called Lauren. "Tell her no, Claire. Tell her the adults are responsible. Tell her nobody gets to test her love." After the call, I placed the forged guardianship papers inside Dana's trial binder. My false signature appeared beneath a statement surrendering authority I had never agreed to surrender. For weeks, I had thought the hearing was about proving that signature was not mine. By then, I understood the harder question. Not who had written my name. Who had taught my daughter that losing me was already decided. The following morning, Dana and I entered the courthouse 20 minutes early. Ethan was already seated at the opposite table. Lauren sat behind him, not beside him. When he saw her carrying a copy of her sworn statement, the confidence left his face. Then the clerk called our case. The hearing took place in a small family courtroom with pale walls, a low ceiling, and no jury box. There was nothing cinematic about it, no crowd, no dramatic entrance. Just two tables, a court reporter, a stack of binders, and my daughter's future reduced to numbered exhibits. The judge began by explaining that the hearing concerned the validity of the temporary guardianship, immediate custody arrangements, and financial safeguards. Any possible criminal conduct would be referred elsewhere and would not be decided that morning. That distinction mattered. Dana had warned me not to expect one hearing to solve every wrong. Lauren testified first. Her voice shook when she admitted using my missing driver's license and signing my name before Gerald Pike. Ethan's attorney stood, Miss Bennett, no one physically forced you to do this, correct? No. You understood you were pretending to be your sister? Yes. And my client never signed her name himself? No. The attorney returned to his table as if that answer settled everything. Then Dana stood. Why did you agree to impersonate your sister? Lauren looked at Ethan before answering. Because he told me Claire had approved it and the court needed the in-person signature corrected. What did he show you? Messages from a number saved under Claire's name. A printed email about her deployment being extended. Another email saying there might be a review of Emma's living arrangements. Did you create those documents? No. Did you purchase the prepaid phone used to send the messages? No. Did you know that the $28,000 transfer was going to satisfy a debt connected to Ethan's company? Lauren's eyes filled. No. He told me it was being moved into an education account. Dana displayed the transfer authorization. Lauren's electronic approval appeared at the bottom. You signed this? Yes. Why? Because the bank told me the guardian could authorize it, and Ethan said the account was for Emma. Lauren did not try to excuse herself. That helped more than any perfect apology could have. Gerald Pike testified by video. He admitted he had not verified my appearance carefully and had failed to obtain a thumbprint. He said the woman had arrived with Ethan, who spoke for her several times and claimed she was recovering from a hand injury. Ethan's attorney objected when Dana asked who paid the fee. The objection was overruled. Gerald checked his records. Payment came from Bennett Ridge Construction, Ethan's company. Dana then introduced the carrier records for the prepaid number. The account had been activated near Ethan's office. Data charges had been paid with his business debit card. Messages from that number matched the ones Lauren received under my name. His attorney argued that employees also had access to company cards. Dana did not debate him. She moved to the school records. Mrs. Patel, Emma's guidance counselor, testified about the notes she had made during meetings months before the petition. Dana handed her the entry concerning Ethan's request that the school contact Lauren first. Did Claire's deployment extension exist at that time? I had never seen documentation of one. What did Mr. Bennett tell you? That he expected Claire to remain overseas longer and wanted Emma prepared for a more permanent arrangement. Ethan shifted in his chair. Dana asked about the phrase practice, Mom. Mrs. Patel hesitated. Emma said her father used it. What did you understand it to mean? That Lauren was helping her get used to calling someone else Mom. My hands tightened beneath the table. The judge looked toward Ethan's attorney. Counsel, does your client dispute making that statement? His attorney leaned toward him. They whispered briefly. Then Ethan took the stand. He appeared tired rather than frightened. That was the first moment his humanity became visible. He looked like a man whose plans had begun as panic and hardened into control. His attorney asked about his business. Ethan admitted a major client had failed to pay him, leaving the company with overdue loans and payroll obligations. Were you trying to steal from your daughter? No. What was your intention? To keep the company alive and protect Emma's future. Dana rose for cross-examination. How did paying your business lender protect Emma's future? If the company collapsed, I would lose my income. So you used money designated for her care. I intended to replace it. Did Claire authorize the transfer? No. Did she authorize guardianship? He looked toward me. I believed she would. That was not my question. No, did you create the deployment extension letter? He paused. I modified information she had already given me. Did you create the false message thread? I used another number. Why? Because Lauren would not have understood the urgency. Dana placed the school note on the screen. You told the school Claire would likely stay overseas before any guardianship petition existed. How did you know that? I assumed it. You told Emma Lauren would be her practice mom. Why? His jaw tightened. I was trying to help her adjust. To what? He did not answer. Dana waited. The judge looked at him. To what, Mr. Bennett? Ethan leaned toward the microphone. To Claire not being there. She was scheduled to return. She always left again. The words came out sharper than anything he had said all morning. For the first time, he stopped speaking through legal strategy. He looked directly at me. You came home tired, fixed everything, and then volunteered for something else. I was the one rearranging my life around your service. I was the one explaining why mom missed the recital, or why the video call got cancelled. Some of it was unfair, some of it was true. That was what made it painful. Dana did not interrupt. She let him continue. I knew if she came home and saw Emma settled with Lauren, she might finally admit this wasn't working. There it was. Not concern, not necessity. A plan to create a reality I would feel too guilty to challenge. Dana asked one final question. If your only purpose was stability, why was the court notice mailed to your old rental address instead of Claire's legal residence? Ethan looked at his attorney, then at the judge, then down at his hands. No explanation came. The address had been established earlier in the record. He had sold the property months before. He had typed that address onto the filing himself. It was the detail he could not blame on Lauren: debt, confusion, or fear. The judge recessed for 40 minutes. When we returned, she dissolved the guardianship immediately. Lauren was removed as legal guardian, though the court did not prohibit future contact. Primary physical custody was temporarily restored to me, with a structured transition plan recommended by the child specialist rather than an abrupt removal from the routines Emma had known. Ethan's visitation became supervised pending a full custody evaluation. The judge froze all accounts connected to Emma and ordered an independent accounting of the transferred funds. She referred the suspected forgery, fraudulent filing, and financial conduct to the appropriate civil and criminal authorities for separate review. There was no speech, no applause, only instructions, deadlines, and consequences. When the clerk handed Dana the written order, I stared at the judge's signature at the bottom. A real signature, properly witnessed. Attached to an order returning legal authority I should never have lost. But even as relief moved through me, I understood that the paper could restore custody. It could not make Emma call me mom again. That part would have to be earned without a courtroom. Emma did not come home with me that afternoon. The child specialist had recommended a gradual transition over 10 days because she had lived under Lauren's daily care for 6 months and had already been taught to fear sudden changes. I agreed, though every part of me wanted to take her hand in the courthouse hallway and never let go. Winning custody did not make urgency safe. The first night, Emma stayed with Lauren while I returned to the house alone. Her yellow sweater hung over the back of a dining chair. A half-finished drawing remained on the table beside a cup of dried markers. 2 women stood beneath a crooked rainbow. One was labeled Mom Lauren. The other wore a square green uniform and had no name. I sat at the table until the sunlight disappeared from the windows. The following morning, Dana called with the first financial consequences. The private lender had agreed to return the $28,000 to the frozen account while ownership of the funds was reviewed. Ethan's company remained responsible for the debt. His business accounts had not been seized, but his lender suspended further credit after discovering that a guardianship transfer had been represented as family investment capital. Within a week, Ethan laid off 3 employees and closed one of his job sites. I felt no satisfaction hearing that. Those employees had families too. Justice rarely stays inside the borders of the people who caused the harm. Gerald Pike surrendered his notary commission pending the state review. Lauren received notice that investigators wanted a formal interview regarding the false signing. Dana arranged separate counsel for her and made clear that cooperation did not guarantee immunity. Lauren called me after receiving the letter. Do you think I should go to jail? I don't decide that. I'm asking what you think. I looked through the living room window toward the street where Emma used to ride her bicycle in uneven circles. I think you knew enough to stop. Lauren began crying. I did not comfort her. That was new for both of us. I loved her, she said. I know. I still do. I know that too. Then why does it sound like none of it mattered? Because love mattered enough that you should have protected her from needing you this way. She became quiet. Then she said, I was afraid when you came home, she wouldn't need me anymore. It was not an excuse. It was the wound beneath the excuse. Lauren had spent most of her life believing usefulness was the only reliable form of love. Ethan understood that and fed it until she could no longer separate caring for Emma from replacing me. I won't tell her you stopped loving her, I said. But I also won't tell her what you did was love. Lauren accepted supervised visits arranged through Emma's therapist. She was not allowed to discuss the case, custody, or whether Emma should live with her. For the first time, her relationship with my daughter had limits that did not depend on Lauren's judgment. Ethan's consequences developed more slowly. The custody evaluation documented coaching behavior, financial misuse, and repeated attempts to place Emma in the center of adult decisions. His supervised visits continued. The evaluator recommended parenting education and individual counseling before any expansion of contact. No one declared him an unfit father forever. That would have been easier emotionally, but less honest. He had attended school meetings. He knew how Emma liked her sandwiches cut. He had held her through fevers and remembered every allergy. He had also trained her to associate loyalty with abandonment. Both truths existed at once. The criminal investigation remained open. Dana warned me that fraud cases could take months and might end with restitution, probation, negotiated charges, or no prosecution at all if evidence standards were not met. I learned to stop measuring recovery by whether Ethan was punished enough. The transition home was harder than the court hearing. On Emma's first overnight stay, she stood inside her bedroom and asked whether Lauren had packed the correct toothpaste. "It's in the bathroom," I said. "She buys the strawberry one." I bought strawberry. She checked anyway. At bedtime, she asked to call Lauren. I allowed it. Afterward, she cried because the call had ended too quickly. I sat beside her without touching her. "Are you mad?" she asked. "No, you won." The word startled me. This wasn't a game. Daddy said court has winners. Courts make decisions. Doesn't mean everyone feels better afterward. She pulled the blanket beneath her chin. "Is Aunt Lauren bad? No. Is Daddy bad? No, then why can't I be with them like before?" I searched for an answer that did not make her responsible for understanding adult betrayal. Because grown-ups can love you and still make choices that are not safe. Other grown-ups have to fix the rules when that happens. She considered that. "Did you make unsafe choices?" "Yes." Her eyes widened slightly. "I left too many things for other people to explain." I thought providing plans was the same as being present. It wasn't always. "Are you leaving again?" The question had been waiting beneath everything else. I had already requested reassignment to a stateside training position. It meant giving up the flight rotation and slowing the career I had built for years. I did not tell Emma I had sacrificed it for her. Children should not carry gratitude for adult choices. "I'm not deploying again this year," I said. "And if that ever changes, you'll hear it from me first." She nodded, but did not smile. Trust did not return because I gave a good answer. It returned through repetition, morning after morning, pickup after pickup, each promise kept without asking her to notice. 2 weeks later, Ethan asked to speak with me after a supervised visit. We stood outside the visitation center while a staff member waited near the entrance. He looked older than he had in court. "The company may not survive," he said. "I heard. I kept thinking I could repay it before anyone knew. That was always your plan for money. Borrow time until the problem became someone else's emergency." He lowered his eyes. "I was angry at you. I know. I thought if Emma chose Lauren, you would finally understand what it felt like to come second." The honesty did not soften what he had done. It only made the damage more comprehensible. "You didn't make me come second," I said. "You made her afraid that loving me would cost her everyone else." He pressed his lips together. "I'm sorry." I believed he meant it in that moment. I also knew remorse was not the same as change. "I hope you become someone she can trust again," I said. "But I'm not going to help you skip the part where you earn it." Then I walked back inside. Emma was sitting at a small table, drawing with a green marker. When she saw me, she held up the page. The two women were there again beneath the rainbow. This time, the figure in uniform had a name: Mom. I folded the paper carefully and placed it inside my bag, not as proof that I had won, as evidence that something inside her had begun to feel safe enough to return. 4 months after the hearing, Emma and I ate pancakes for dinner at our kitchen table. She had insisted on making them herself. The first one tore when she tried to flip it. The second landed halfway across the stove. By the third, she had learned to wait until the bubbles formed around the edges. "Deployment pancakes," she announced. I looked at the uneven stack. "Why are they called that?" Because they take a long time to come back. She said it without sadness. That was how I knew the word had begun losing some of its power over her. Our life was not repaired in any dramatic way. It became ordinary again by degrees. I accepted the stateside position teaching patient transport procedures to younger medical crews. At first, I missed the aircraft more than I admitted. I missed the pressure, the precision, and the feeling of being useful in places where everything depended on competent hands. But the new role gave me predictable evenings. I attended school conferences in person. I learned the names of Emma's friends without reading them from a calendar. When I promised to be at her recital, she still asked twice whether I was certain. The morning of the performance, she checked my bedroom before breakfast to make sure my uniform bag was not packed. I did not tell her to stop worrying. I simply stayed. Ethan's criminal case ended with a negotiated plea involving fraudulent financial documents and misuse of funds. He avoided incarceration but received probation, mandatory repayment, and restrictions on managing accounts belonging to Emma or any dependent. His construction company closed before winter. He found work supervising projects for another contractor, which wounded his pride but gave him a stable paycheck. His visits remained supervised until the evaluator documented several months of counseling and appropriate behavior. During one visit, Emma asked him whether he had made Lauren become her mother. According to the supervisor's report, Ethan did not blame me or the court. He said, "I made you feel like you had to choose." That was wrong. It was not enough to erase anything. It was the first useful thing he had given her in a long time. Lauren's case was resolved separately. Her cooperation, lack of prior offenses, and admission of responsibility resulted in probation, community service, and a permanent record of the fraudulent notarization. She moved into a smaller apartment across town. Her supervised contact with Emma continued twice a month. At the beginning, she arrived carrying gifts almost every time. Emma's therapist asked her to stop. The next visit, Lauren brought nothing. She sat on the floor and helped Emma assemble a puzzle without trying to make herself necessary. That was harder for her than buying anything. My relationship with my sister remained limited. We spoke about Emma's schedule, therapy recommendations, and practical matters. We did not return to the closeness we once had. Some losses are not failures of forgiveness. They are the shape trust takes after it has been broken too deliberately. One Saturday morning, Lauren stood near my front door after a visit and noticed the framed drawing hanging in the hallway. The two women beneath the rainbow. Mom, Lauren. Mom. Her eyes remained on it for a moment. You kept both names. Emma drew dames. Both names. Nodded. Thank you. It wasn't for you. I know, that was the first time I believed she truly did. After she left, Emma came downstairs carrying the old manila folder from my office. I had moved it to a locked cabinet, but she had seen me reviewing documents with Dana and knew it contained what she called the court papers. "Can we throw these away now?" she asked. I took the folder from her. Inside were copies of the forged consent, the false extension letter, the bank records, the prepaid phone report, and the final order dissolving the guardianship. For months, those papers had controlled our lives. They had determined where Emma slept, who supervised my hugs, and whether strangers considered me a mother entitled to speak privately with her own child. I wanted to put them through the shredder. Instead, I returned them to the cabinet. "Not yet," I said. "Adults have to keep some records, even bad ones, especially those." She frowned, then pointed at the forged signature. "It looks like yours. It was supposed to. Did that scare you?" I considered giving her the safe answer. Instead, I gave her the truthful one she could carry at her age. "Yes, because someone took your name. Because I was afraid people would believe the paper more than they believed me." Emma looked at the signature again. Then she reached for a pencil from the desk. At the bottom of the copied page, beneath the false version of my name, she printed hers in large uneven letters. "Emma Bennett. What are you doing?" So the paper knows who it was about. I stared at her handwriting. Every adult involved had used her name in documents, arguments, bank transfers, and court filings. We had discussed her stability, her future, her best interest, and her attachment, but she had never been the author of any part of it. I closed the folder with her name still visible on the final page. That evening, we made tomato soup and grilled cheese. Emma did her homework at the counter while I prepared lunches for the next day. Nothing important appeared to be happening. That was what made it precious. Before bed, she stood in my doorway holding Captain Button by one ear. "Mom?" The word came without hesitation now. Yes, if you have to leave someday, will you come back? I set aside the shirt I was folding. I can't promise life will never make me leave a room. She waited. But I promise you will never have to learn from someone else whether I'm coming back. You will hear the truth from me. She climbed into my bed and leaned against my side. For a while, neither of us spoke. The guardianship order had once carried my forged signature beneath words surrendering my place in her life. Months later, the paper remained locked away. Not because it still had power, because it reminded me how easily official language can disguise private cruelty, and how patiently the truth sometimes has to be assembled before anyone is willing to see it. The signature at the bottom had never belonged to me. The silence around it had. That was the part I could change, and I did, one ordinary day at a time. If this story stayed with you, tell me which moment changed the way you understood the family. And if you value stories about quiet strength, difficult truth, and realistic consequences, you're welcome to join me for the next one.